Welcome to part 1 in a series where I talk about my best and worst D&D games. I'll be sharing my experience and why I think these campaigns were great or terrible, as well as providing some insight on what you can take away from them to make your own game better. And don't expect this story to be perfectly rosy. While the actual game with the characters is the best campaign I have ever enjoyed as a player, the story of the players is the biggest example of an RPG horror story I can remember from personal experience. Without further ado, let me tell you about Forsaken. For starters, yes, this campaign is so boss that it has its own movie poster drawn up by one of the players and funded by the Dungeon Master. I'll be referring to the art throughout the video, but our story doesn't begin here. Our campaign began in 2014, just after the release of the new 5th edition D&D starter set. I had been playing Pathfinder and running it for around 3 years at this point, and I had also gotten involved with the local LARP group, but I had never actually played Dungeons & Dragons. So when the Dungeon Master from the group invited me to his basement one Wednesday night to try out the new system, I was down. We wound up running a session 0 with 2 other players, both LARP guys who were also experienced game masters eager to try the new D&D. We made our characters and started playing that same night, fighting goblins and saving Gundren Rockseeker in the lost mines of Felmdelver. Now, let's meet the party. I played a character named Griffico, a wood elf barbarian who I described as having Native American features and voiced as Antonio Banderas. It's okay, you can say yikes. Another player made Bronger Labem, a human fighter whose only distinguishing feature was that he fought using a shovel. And player 3 made Daikon the Deacon, a hill dwarf cleric who had no distinguishing features if I'm being honest. Now, you may notice some minor issues here, what with Griffico being a little insensitive, Bronger being gimmicky, and Daikon being kind of basic. And we could have fleshed them out more if the DM wasn't so eager to get us started on the adventure. Talking to him sometime later, he said that it was fully his intention to pull together a supergroup of role players and launch a truly epic tale. And he succeeded. We loved the game. The group meshed well. We even invited a 4th player, one of the DM's roommates. We'll talk about the other roommate later, he foreshadowingly. We went through the motions of the starter adventure while the DM peppered in some of his own personal touches, like the Goblin Matron who offered us magic items in exchange for fair trade. By the time we defeated the Black Spider, we were fully on board for whatever was next. That is when our DM unveiled the new adventure book, Elemental Evil, and said that everything we had just played was the prologue to a far more grand adventure. We took his vision to heart and we made a few changes. I wasn't vibing with Griffico and was intrigued by the options offered in the Elemental book, so I made Callida Vandemian, a noble fire genasi bard with inspiration from Farnese of Berserk and Elythia from Spartacus, 2 of my favorite pieces of fiction, which makes for a far better base for a dedicated roleplay character. The newcomer also switched characters to an optimized Dragonborn sorcerer cleric named Balthazar from a previous campaign, and the DM worked with him to establish the planar hopping that caused him to be present in Phandalin, becoming like a time-traveling doomsayer trying to stop the elemental evil from conquering the world. Bronger began establishing backstory and motivations according to the brilliant 5th edition guidelines of traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, creating significance for his shovel that would only be revealed later on. And Daikon? He stayed Daikon. Sometimes it's okay to be a basic dwarf with dwarf tropes. And when this newly solidified party came together, we were known as the Edge of Death. Over the next 2 years, the Edge of Death went from level 1 to level 16 as we miraculously played every Wednesday night. Everyone pitched in on snacks. We had our own mixed drink called Cinnamon in it that was just gas station Fireball and orange soda, and Bronger's player started bringing in booster packs of minis for our DM every week. While the rest of us didn't quite show as much appreciation, we did contribute in other ways when the DM got tired of all of our puns and insisted on placing a quarter in the pun jar every time we made a bad fantasy joke. Well, Daikon's player paid up front with a $20 bill one night to cover himself for a lifetime of puns, and I doubled down. The flabbergasted DM only meant the pun jar as a joke, but he accepted the money and came back with another adventure book to keep things rolling. And he did a lot to make these adventures unique, to the point that they are almost unrecognizable as Wizards of the Coast publications, which in my opinion is the best way you can run a published adventure. He had his own pantheon of gods, his own cast of NPCs, and his own storylines and cosmology that drove things forward, taking in our input as players as we went along. I've talked about the fictional influences on my own games, but if I'm being honest about my influence as a DM, this guy was more of a role model for me than Matt Colville or Matt Mercer ever was. I remember one session where he took us each aside and explained that one of us was actually an intellect devourer in disguise, and that one player was me. It made for a truly unique role-playing experience, and one that I have repeated with similar gimmicks. The DM loved video games like Chrono Trigger, Mega Man, and various Zelda titles, and he incorporated that classic boss fight philosophy into our combat encounters, with the most memorable fight being against a Kraken and his multiple tentacles, each with their own health pools and abilities. As we made our way through the different elemental cults and their champions, we were eventually met with an offer from the Wind Champion. She said that if we helped her defeat the other 3 cults, she would protect our lands and our people as allies. Khalida and Bronger agreed, but Balthazar and Dakan would not capitulate. Everyone had perfectly good motivations and reasons, and so at the end of the session, the party split. We came back with secondary characters, trading off a few sessions with Khalida and Bronger, and then Balthazar and Dakan. Far from damaging the narrative and the party as a whole, the divide actually helped each character shine and establish their role and remind them why they needed each other, leading to a cathartic reunion where the A-team finally got back together and kicked the Wind Champion's ass. The DM incorporated a ton of fun and memorable NPCs, too many for me to go into here, but at one point in the late game, after our original party got back together, we uncovered and re-established a fortress and got all of our NPC pals to retreat there for a big last stand. It was a massive siege lasting 2 sessions, and we were all pleading with the DM to not kill our favorite NPCs, but they were all our favorites and they were all in danger. We wound up saving as many as we could and winning the battle, but the elemental gods were winning the war. The giant siege wasn't even the finale, it was just our Helm's Deep before the real battle began. Meanwhile, Khalida had been torn between accepting an offer from Emex by becoming his champion or staying with the Edge of Death. It was a perfect moral dilemma that I didn't plan for in my backstory. It was completely created by and brilliantly paced by the DM. There was a point when it made logical sense for Khalida to accept the offer, but the only thing that held her back and held me back was the bond we had with the party. The goblin matron wound up being a dragon cursed into the form of a goblin, but she endeavored to make the most of it by uniting what goblins she could and teaching them community and trade. She made for a dramatic boss fight on her own when in later sessions she was freed from her curse at the cost of losing her mind. Bronger wound up being one of the deepest roleplay depictions I have ever seen to this day. It was revealed that he and his brother were once soldiers in an unjust war, and in a disagreement, Bronger killed his brother with a shovel and hastily buried him, and now out of shame and penance, he has vowed to fight with only that shovel in hand. When he lost an eye in combat, he asked a wizard to replace it with the Nothic eye we had been carrying for some time, allowing him to glimpse into the secrets and the fates of other characters we came across and giving a magical element to this otherwise fully martial Battlemaster kit. His player was a really swell guy, just a nice and caring dude, and we became friends, having deep conversations in the parking lot after the sessions were finished. And that's not even the full highlight reel. Every single session was a banger. Every twist and every new NPC brought interesting angles to the story, yet all threads were tied together by the end. The DM remains one of the finest storytellers and performers I have ever gotten to play with, and the story he told with our help is the best D&D game I have ever played. But that's all in-game. The other side of the coin is what's going on outside the basement, in the real world and on our texts and social media. What I'm about to tell you is not pleasant. If you would like this story to be about the best game I ever played and my 5 takeaways for you, please skip this section. If you want to keep watching, brace yourself for some serious geek drama. So, I remember one night when we were fighting these Earth mages, and they cast Dominate spells on Kalida and Dakon, meaning that those two characters are now under the bad guy's control against Bronger and Balthazar. And while we're all kind of metagaming about how this could play out, Balthazar's players start spouting off his superior build and how Balthazar could easily kill all our characters if he wanted to. It just so happened that I wasn't a fan of his prior to this, due to some history playing together in Humans versus Zombies at our tiny liberal arts college the previous semester. So I already don't like this dude, and at the time, I don't like power gamers either. And he's talking about killing my character, who I'm extremely personally attached to, who I don't have control over at the moment, and could very easily die without any agency. And I'm a weirdo with emotional control issues. So I fucking snap. I forget exactly how mad I got and what I said, but it was enough that everyone went silent and the DM entered into teacher mode and split us up throughout the house. This almost destroyed the game. The DM later told me that Bronger really wanted to stop playing and Balthazar felt threatened, but he stood up for me and said we should give it another shot without the chance of PvP, so I apologized and I agreed. I personally apologized to Balthazar and we wound up bonding over Gravity Falls, and I apologized to Bronger too, and we wound up bonding over a lot. With the fallout from my little outburst. Dakon didn't really care, he just wanted to play more D&D. So horror story averted, right? Let's get some lore going here. We all met at the same LARP group. That LARP group was helmed by a guy who I'm just going to call Dad because he kept stylizing our LARP group as a family, and clearly he was the patriarch of that family. Plus, I had some weird hangups about my own dad at the time and really started believing this charismatic, cool, elder geek guy was my new father figure. Anyway, this family was incestuous. We didn't just LARP, we would have wild house parties with all the dungeon props, including one time when I made out with the DM before he was my DM, and he did look like a young Pedro Pascal, so yeah, I was happy with that, but it also meant nothing. Sometimes you do stuff at a party. I did have one big relationship within the LARP family, plus a few hookups and several more casual flirtings. On at least 2 occasions, I now know that Dad actually nudged younger women my way with success. It turned out that he was nudging away the girls that weren't his type, while holding the interest of other young women to himself. Now, to be clear, there were some pretty big age gaps, but no one was underage. But LARP Dad was allegedly found to be exchanging sexual favors for game favors with multiple younger women over the course of a few years, which we all sort of suspected but kept quiet about because he was in an open relationship. An open marriage, actually, which came as news to his wife, who happened to be the LARP mom, co-director of our group. There was a divorce, both their marriage and the LARP. Everyone told different versions of the story, everyone picked a side or removed themselves entirely from the whole toxic situation. At our D&D table, back to that, I tried to bring up the topic, but it became very clear that no one wanted to talk about it in the open. I talked about the situation in private with Bronger, who had a hardline stance against Dad and believed everything Mom said. And, sure, believe women. Okay. We all sort of moved on and ignored the subject and ignored our happy little LARP that was no more. And everyone tried to ignore roommate number 3. This is the Jezebel of our story. Dad had been vaguely accused of affairs with several younger women, but the most recent one and the one that set things off was this Jezebel, the roommate who has always been upstairs while we played D&D in the basement. Now, I had not really known this girl outside of a few interactions in character at LARP. But when I saw her one day in the apartment and I saw all the rabid LARP drama on Facebook, I could tell that this whole event and the blame she was receiving at the heart of it had really affected her friendships. And there was no way she could go back to the LARP, which she had truly loved. So I reached out. I offered to be her friend. We had several hangouts and we got ice cream and walked in the park and played Pokemon Go, and she insisted on showing me all of Over the Garden Wall in one night, which uh, we were really becoming close friends very quickly. There was just one problem. Um, I was still in my fuckboy era. Friendship turned into undefined situationship. No one in the D&D group knew about this. I briefly mentioned something about Jezebel to Bronger, and he quickly condemned her for destroying his LARP. So I changed the subject, which kind of confused me because Jezebel told me she never did anything with Dad, and I believed her. We believe women, right? But Bronger got more distant. He was talking to me less, talking to the DM less, and missed a couple sessions in what had otherwise been a nonstop 2-year run. LARP meant a lot to him, and losing it and getting caught up in the drama and trying to start a new LARP with Mom while Dakan and our DM stuck with Dad was all getting to him. The DM was also getting stressed out by the drama. This D&D game had become his most significant project, and here it was falling apart in the final act. We had to finish. He had to cook. We had to play D&D. And I agreed. I played other games, but my job was really shitty and I didn't have much money for my other activities. This Wednesday night game became the most significant thing in my life. And if you think that sounds sad and melodramatic, then welcome to my headspace at the time. I needed to escape and be Callida for a few hours every week. I needed these characters in this world desperately. So when the finale came and Bronger texted the group chat that he wasn't feeling it tonight, I snapped again, not in anger, but in frantic, hysteric despair. I called Bronger in tears. I pleaded with him to be okay because I needed to play tonight. The DM needed this game to be over so he could move on. We all deserved our ending, and he couldn't even tell me what wasn't feeling okay that night. Why? He eventually relented. He hung up and texted the group chat that he could still play, so we all rushed to the basement to finish this campaign. And it was a glorious final session. It was perfect in every way, including the tragedy that Bronger died. I cried. I distinctly remember this moment when everyone got quiet because I was so caught up in ugly crying over Bronger being dead. I broke character and said, "I'm fine, guys, keep playing," and they snapped back into it. We played it out. We had little 5-minute epilogues for our characters. The DM gave the ending narration, and we went home, and we never got back together again. Next Wednesday, I reflected on everything that happened. Callida was completely out of my head, but Bronger wasn't responding to my texts. The DM wasn't talking to anyone. He was glad the adventure was over, but he was totally burnt out by the 2 years he had spent making this epic story for the supergroup he had assembled. And I realized that I never knew what was bugging Bronger that night and why he didn't want to play. I still don't know. I could have talked to him as a friend, but instead I steamrolled his feelings so that I could have my perfect D&D night. I realized that in that moment I cared more about his character than I did about him as a person, and that broke me. Then I realized what I had done to Jezebel, girlfriend zoning her rather than just being her friend when she needed one. And I had barely talked to Balthazar and Dakan for weeks. My LARP family was gone, my D&D group was gone, and I had destroyed 2 close friendships through my own conscious choices. So that's when I erased my Facebook and my phone contacts. I didn't talk to anyone but my own roommates, who I mostly interacted with to get drunk with and play D&D with. I checked myself into behavioral therapy and wound up getting my dream job as a game master at a trendy downtown board game cafe. Some months later, the DM, Dacon, and Jezebel walked in the door of that board game cafe. They were all shocked to see me. The DM and Dacon hugged me immediately, but I couldn't hug Jezebel. She didn't deserve that. I had ghosted her like I had everyone else. I did my job finding them some board games and getting them some drinks, and after we exchanged contact info. A few weeks later, Bronger visited the board game cafe too, and all he said to me was, "Oh, hey, Jackson, how's therapy going?" And he left. I played the best D&D game of my life, a 2-year grand epic about gods and heroes that no cinematic universe can touch. And all I have to show for it is this poster. If by some slim chance anyone I've been talking about is watching this now, years after I burned the bridge, I'm sorry. You deserve better. I was a shitty friend and a fuck-up who still had a lot to figure out. But I have figured out a lot now. John at Incendium D&D has this saying that we can find our better selves through gaming. And I believe in that because of this story I just told you. Because this was me at my worst, and I only came to that realization through everything revolving around this one D&D game. I never would have started therapy if I didn't want to be better next time. Sometimes you don't get to reforge lost friendships or be forgiven by the ones you hurt. Sometimes all you can do is do better and pay it forward by being a better friend to the next group you meet. And I know I've done that. I know I've gotten better, and I'll keep getting better, and I want that for you too. I'm telling you this story because if I can do it, then you have the power to be better than your past. So let's talk about some D&D tips for your next campaign. Tip number 1. Let session 0 breathe. Leave some time between character creation and playing so you can actually think things through. You'll wind up with more Kaladas and less Grificos. Tip number 2. Customize your published adventures. Most of them aren't bad, but they need some spice. You have the flavor and the creativity, and so do your players. Own it. Make the story yours. Drive it like you stole it. Tip number 3. Treat your DM well. You don't have to buy them minis every week, but maybe some extra supplies every now and then, or little checkups on how their life is going outside the game will relieve the pressure and remind them they're more than just a game provider. Tip number 4. Get to know your group. Pause the game and have friendly chats or a movie night if there's something big going on and that might interfere with your game. Your relationships with real people are more important than your storylines. And tip number 5. There are so many lessons to learn from all the drama I just dumped in this video, but I'm going to leave it at this. Don't be a dick. Thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to sharing with you my very worst D&D game, which I promise will ironically be less of a horror story than my best game. You don't have to leave a comment, but I want you to take a moment and think about the best game you ever played in, what made it the best, and why it was the people you were playing with. Have a nat 20 day. Bye-bye.